Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today is a different kind of video. I was working on a case and then, because everybody was talking about it, I watched the Surviving R. Kelly docuseries. It's a 6-part series on Lifetime, basically chronicling the allegations and things that R. Kelly has been accused of and talking to people who witnessed these things, who were victims of his abuse. And it's a really good docuseries. If you have Lifetime, I suggest it. But when I watched it, I felt compelled to make this video because it really moved me and it really bothered me more than anything. I'm going to talk about the docuseries. I'm going to talk about some of R. Kelly's legal battles. I'm going to go over the girls in the docuseries and in his life that have come forward about R. Kelly, and we're going to discuss it in, normal Stephanie Harlowe fashion, where I'm going to give you my opinions. So if you are like a die-hard R. Kelly supporter for whatever reason at this point still in 2019, I feel like that's something you should not be any longer. But if you are, you might not want to watch this video because you'll probably get triggered. And if you don't even know about any of this, if you don't know who R. Kelly is, or if you just think he's a guy who makes cool club songs and you don't know any of the stuff that's gone on behind the scenes, then, stay tuned because I'm about to blow your mind. When we talk about true crime on this channel, we usually talk about the victims who are gone, the people who aren't with us any longer, and we kind of tell their story. But sometimes the victims we forget are the ones that are still alive, that have to live every day with the horrible things that they went through and that happened to them. The good thing is, though, these victims, these people who have gone through horrible and traumatic events and have lived to tell us about it, we can help them and we can help other people like them. So that's really the main purpose of this video, to raise awareness that these things happen every day. And the only reason you don't know about it is because it doesn't center around somebody who's famous. This video, thank God, is sponsored by Audible because I have a feeling it may be demonetized, but it's sponsored by Audible today. Audible has over 140,000 titles in its audiobook library. I love Audible. If you are a fan of this channel or have watched any of my videos, you know Audible is one of my go-to apps. I use it all the time in the car, at home. When I fall asleep, I like to listen to audiobooks. I always have since I was like a kid. I used to listen to audiobooks to fall asleep. And it really helps me in my research. It helps me when I'm looking into cases because I don't always have the time to sit down and actually do research on the computer or read a book because I have 3 kids and a very busy life. And it's nice when I'm on the go to be able to pop an audiobook on my iPhone or my iPad and just listen to it and get the information even if I'm still doing something else. So if you would like to try your free 30-day trial of Audible, they'll give you a free book. Go to www.audibletrial.com/Stephanie Harlowe and the link is in the description box. Let's get started. So R. Kelly's music was the soundtrack to my teenage years, right? Ignition was playing at every party, every nightclub. It was my jam, to be honest. When it would come on, I was that girl that was like, this is my jam. There were, of course, rumors and allegations and talk of a sex tape going around, but at the time, I know myself, I was a pretty young kid, 16, 17, just kind of having fun and not really thinking about that side of things. And I think a lot of people just thought it was young girls who were trying to get fame or money out of associating their name with R. Kelly's. It was hard for the public to believe that somebody like R. Kelly, who even though he made music with sexually explicit lyrics, he was also, a big presence at his local churches. He also had serious power anthems like I Believe I Can Fly, which was in the Space Jam soundtrack. He seemed to have it together. He was a creative genius, and we just didn't want to believe it. And that's the truth. People didn't want to believe it. But I think that's what he was banking on, right? And this is a pretty common narrative in Hollywood and the music industry and the movie industry. You have these men, typically, Not that women don't do it. Don't come for me. I know women do it too. But men, typically, in positions of power with money and clout and a name that's well known, they abuse their power and they abuse people and use them for their own means. But as usual, on my channel, in order to understand why somebody does what they do, we have to go back, way back into time. So sorry I had to pull out the Casey and JoJo lyrics, because we're talking about like 90s R&B right now, and I had to do it. All right, let's go back into time and talk about R. Kelly's childhood. Robert Sylvester Kelly was born on January 8th, 1967, in the projects of Chicago. He has an older brother, an older sister, and one younger brother. His older brother, Bruce, is currently incarcerated at Chicago's Cook County Jail for theft, burglary, possession of a controlled substance, and an outstanding arrest warrant. He also has quite the rap sheet, so he's no stranger to troubles with the law. R. Kelly's younger brother is named Carrie, and his older sister is named Teresa, and we will talk a little bit more about Teresa later on in this video, as well as Carrie. Now, Carrie claims that Rob, R. Kelly, he wasn't cut out for the streets. He was shy, he was timid, he had a kind of a low self-esteem because he struggled with reading and writing, and he would be made fun of in school about it, and he really preferred, while everybody else was running the streets and playing, he preferred to be inside playing with his keyboard. One day, his brother says he found Rob in the bathroom crying, and when his brother asked why was he crying, R. Kelly said he was just sick of the kids at school making fun of him for his learning disability. But one place he did excel in was music. His father was never around. His mother, Joanna, raised all her kids as a single mother, but she was heavily involved in the church. She was one of the lead singers in the choir. She loved to sing, she loved to dance, and she brought up her kids in the church. And Carrie, R. Kelly's brother, he actually tells a cute little story about how she would sing Gladys Knight, and they would all be her peps, like her backup singers. R. Kelly claims his first musical inspiration came from his first real experience with loss when he was 9 years old. He had a little girlfriend, Lulu, this childhood kind of crush thing. They would hold hands and they promised each other that they would be together forever. He said he would love her forever. And one day they were playing by a creek, and I guess there was like a tussle with some older boys, and Lulu got pushed into the creek and the strong current took her away, and she didn't make it. Check, check. Do I need more light or what? Let's try that. His high school music teacher, Lena McLin, she saw really enormous talent in R. Kelly. She was impressed by his ability to write, create, and sing music, and she encouraged him to take his focus away from athletics because he was playing basketball at that time and really channel all his energy and time into music because she believed that was his great strength. R. Kelly describes Lena McLin as a second mother to him, as somebody who was super inspirational and motivational to him and was there for him when he needed somebody. He still struggled in high school with reading and writing. Like, he just couldn't do it. But he learned to play music by ear. So think Nick Cannon in Drumline. He could hear a song or hear a beat, hear a melody, and he could replicate it just by ear. He dropped out of high school during his senior year, and he began to street perform under the Chicago L train tracks. He soon hooked up with some other musically talented boys in Chicago, and they formed a group which they called MGM, which stood for Musically Gifted Men. MGM's first big break was when they appeared on Natalie Cole's talent show called The Big Break. In 1989, they performed on the talent show, and they went on to win the $100,000 grand prize. In 1990, MGM released their first single titled Why You Wanna Play Me, but the group was not meant to be, and they broke up shortly thereafter. In 1991, R. Kelly signed with Jive Records, and he joined a new group of Chicago artists, and it was called Public Announcement. In 1992, R. Kelly went with Public Announcement on tour as their lead singer, but it wasn't meant to be. I think R. Kelly doesn't like to work with other people where he might be outshined. He doesn't like to be part of a group. He wants to be the most important person in the room, in my opinion. And being part of a group, just like being part of a sports team, which is why I think he didn't really have too much of a, hard time leaving sports behind, because that is a team event. Being part of a group, being part of a sports team, you have to work together. It can't be the R. Kelly show. It can't be always what you want. And we will find that R. Kelly has serious control issues. In January of 1993, R. Kelly struck out on his own solo career, and on November 9th, 1993, his first solo album was released, titled 12 Play, and on this album you would have popular singles that we still know about today, Sex Me, Bump and Grind. Bump and Grind was one of the very popular songs. That song was on his first album. He came out of the gate hot, right off the bat. But if you know these songs, like I do, because I was a 90s kid, you can already kind of see looking back, not then, because that was pretty common in the time, but you can see looking back now, R. Kelly's relationship with sex and how his blatant sexuality became a hallmark of his personality. He desensitized people to it. He was just like that. 90s R&B was definitely defined by these type of bedroom songs. Don't get me wrong. R. Kelly was not the only person doing this. No Diggity by Blackstreet, also my jam. That was released in 1996. Too Close by Next, released in 1997. Pony by Genuine, released in 1996. I Wanna Sex You Up by Color Me Bad, released in 91. And the list goes on. And I mean, these are great songs. But I listen to them now and I think about how old I was when I was listening to them originally. I mean, when Blackstreet came out with No Diggity, I was 12, and it was my favorite song. I memorized it and still know all the lyrics to this day. And when it comes on the radio, I still, will blast it in my car and, I'll sing along with it. But it wasn't a good song for a 12-year-old to be listening to. Too Close by Next, released in 1997 when I was 13. I'm literally giving you guys my age right now, but I don't care anymore, because you have to realize, if you do not know the lyrics to the song Too Close by Next, you should look them up and then imagine to a 13-year-old listening to them. But that was the time. It was all about sex in these songs. And you will really not see songs like that being released today, at least not on mainstream radio. These songs were all being played on the local, top 40 stations. Basically, the whole point of that was no one was surprised by R. Kelly's in-your-face sexual lyrics. He was just one of many at this time. After the success of his first album, R. Kelly actually became a very popular and in-demand writer and producer for other artists. He was a very talented singer, songwriter, producer. He just had a way of knowing what was gonna hit and what would sell, and other people wanted to capture that spark for their own albums. The list of artists that R. Kelly has produced, not just worked with or done duets with, because that's a different list, but the list of artists that he has just, produced is the cream of the crop, honestly, especially at that time. You've got Billy Ocean, Janet and Michael Jackson, Toni Braxton, Mary J. Blige, Vanessa Williams, Celine Dion, Luther Vandross, 112, Britney Spears, Joe, Tyrese, Jennifer Lopez, Ciara, Ray J, Trey Songz, Frankie J, the Pussycat Dolls, Whitney Houston, and Aaliyah. And we will talk about Aaliyah in just a moment. In the 1990s, after he had dropped out of high school, and he was doing his own thing musically, he would still go back to his old alma mater, Kenwood Academy, his old high school. He would sit outside in his car and pull up on girls and talk to them. He would even go into his old music teacher's classroom during practice and rehearsal to listen to the girls sing, and then he would bring them, out afterwards to talk to them about a singing career. And no one really questioned it this time. In the neighborhood where he was from, he was a hero, and they just saw him as somebody who was going to make it, and they saw him as somebody who was trying to help other people or other kids, but just girls usually. But rumor had it, he wasn't going to the school to help talented girls become stars. He was going to the school to pick up young high school girls, underage high school girls. Music journalist Jim DeRogatis says that R. Kelly would go to the high school, pick up girls, and hook up with them afterwards. I don't think it needs to be said that R. Kelly was over the age of 18 at this time, and all these high school girls were not over the age of 18. Even a sergeant in the Oak Ridge Police Department says he would often see Kelly parked outside the school in his car talking to high school girls. He didn't just go to the high school though. He went to the local McDonald's where he knew all the high school kids went after school to hang out. And he would basically just check all the girls out and then send one of his buddies over to the girl to be like, hey, R. Kelly wants to meet you. You've been chosen. All his buddies back at the studio said he would often come back from his McDonald's trips with a girl or two in tow. Former backup dancer to R. Kelly, Javonte Cunningham, she was 14 when she met R. Kelly, and she, became one of his backup dancers, but he would send her out to go bring girls back to him. So she would just go and bring some of her high school friends back, and they would all hang out at the studio, and she claims that one night she walked in and R. Kelly and one of her friends was in the recording booth. So the recording booth will be all glass. You can see in and out. And she saw R. Kelly with her friend in the recording booth and, what they were doing. And everybody out in the recording studio area where all the controls are, they were all just sitting there like they knew what was happening. And this friend, according to Javonte, was also 14 or 15. She was like in her sophomore class. Let's go back to Aaliyah now. Aaliyah Houghton, she was 12 when she met R. Kelly. Aaliyah was originally a Brooklyn native, but she was raised in Detroit, Michigan. Aaliyah was incredibly talented. She's one of my favorite recording artists of all time. She was 10 years old. She performed on Star Search beautifully.
Don't change a hair for me, not if you care for me. Stay, little Valentine, stay.
She was signed with a record label at the age of 12, and her uncle Barry Hankerson, a record producer who founded the label Blackground Records, he introduced her to R. Kelly, who quickly became her mentor. Barry Hankerson was also married to Gladys Knight for 4 years. Fun fact. But the relationship between Kelly and Aaliyah was not simply that of an older, seasoned artist helping a much younger artist make a name for herself. He was 12 years older than her when she met him. She was 12 and he was 24. When Aaliyah met R. Kelly, her image was completely different. She was kind of a tomboy. She had braces. She wore glasses. She was kind of quiet and shy. And R. Kelly actually had all his girls that were around completely change her image, started putting her in the sports bras and baggy pants, showing off her stomach all the time, the backwards hat, the kind of like street look that they wanted her to have. When they were finished with her, she looked much older than her age. It was just a much more sexed up version of her. Her first album, produced and co-written by R. Kelly when she was 14, was called Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. The title song of this album, also called Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, is described as a soulful ballad about Aaliyah crooning of longing for an older lover. The lyrics are as follows. Age ain't nothing but a number. Throwing down ain't nothing but a thing. There's something I have for you. It'll never change. Apparently, this wasn't just a clever song for an emerging artist to sing. This was R. Kelly broadcasting his sexual preferences to the entire world in the form of a 14-year-old girl. The fact that anybody in this young girl's life thought it was okay for a 14-year-old girl to sing these lyrics and put them out there to the world is beyond me. It's basically the pedophile anthem, right? And R. Kelly was just sitting there, banking on it, making money on it, getting off on all the rumors that were sparked about him and Aaliyah having a relationship after the song came out, obviously. That's what people would think. They had gotten quite close. they would be interviewed about their relationship and asked if they were in a relationship, and they never came right out and said they were, but they didn't say they weren't either. You know, Aaliyah would say, "This is my absolute best friend. He's everything to me." And there's one interview they did with BET. I'll see if I can get a clip of it for you, but they show up wearing matching clothes, like matching Mickey Mouse clothes, and they're very clearly close in this interview. And at one point, one of the interviewees, because it's a woman and a man, and the woman asks Aaliyah, "How old are you?" You know, just for the record. And Aaliyah says, "That's a secret."
Yeah. Okay, let's clear something up, because you know I've been getting a rundown on the street. Everybody seems to think that y'all are either girlfriend or boyfriend, or cousins, or friends. let's just get the record straight.
I better go get me a white Jeep.
Well, no, we're not related at all. No, we're not. We're just very close. He's my best friend.
Yeah, cool.
Now, who found who?
In the whole wide world.
And for the record, you are how old?
That's a secret.
Women doesn't disclose her age.
Keeping it under wraps.
This interview on BET wasn't the only time they were asked if they were in a relationship. They were asked multiple times if they were in a relationship by many different people and news publications, and everybody wanted to know, were they in a relationship? Because they acted like they were. But he was 12 years older than her, and it was weird. But in 1994, Vibe magazine broke the story that R. Kelly had indeed married his child bride, his protege, in a secret ceremony at the Sheraton Gateway Suites in Rosemont, Illinois on August 31st, 1994. On the marriage certificate, her age is listed as 18 when she was in fact 15. And he was 27. R. Kelly's former manager, Demetrius Smith, has come forward and did speak in the docuseries quite a bit about actually being at the wedding. And he says he helped R. Kelly forge documents to show that Aaliyah was 18 so that the wedding could happen, that R. Kelly was well aware she was not 18. Javonte Cunningham also alleges in the documentary that while they were on the tour bus, she witnessed Aaliyah and R. Kelly in a sexual relationship. So they would be confined to these tour buses while they were, driving around, and everybody would get kind of antsy and they would run around and play pranks on each other, bust into each other's rooms. They were playing pranks. They were children. They were children on a tour bus with a grown man. So they were playing pranks. And they busted into R. Kelly's room one night to play a prank. And there she witnessed R. Kelly and Aaliyah in the bed having sex. So this was well before Aaliyah was 18 or 17. Within months of the Vibe article and the marriage becoming public, it was annulled at the insistence of Aaliyah's parents, I believe. R. Kelly claimed, up and down insisted he did not know how old she was, but in fact, that was a lie. Because in a 1994 documentary where R. Kelly's being asked about what he's doing in music recently or whatever, he says, "I'm mentoring a young singer named Aaliyah, and she's 14. He knew how old she was, and so did all the people around him who helped him bed and marry a child. Allegedly, and you will hear me say allegedly a lot because I do not want to get sued, but allegedly, R. Kelly paid $100 to Aaliyah to keep her silence on the matter. Now, Aaliyah's mother denies these allegations. She denies that anything sexually happened between R. Kelly and her daughter. She claims that she and her husband, who has sadly since passed away, they were both with Aaliyah and R. Kelly on the tour bus and on tour the entire time, and nothing ever happened. This is her statement. The woman and so-called backup singer that describes seeing, meeting, or ever breathing the same air as my daughter Aaliyah is lying and is a liar. My husband and I were always on tour with her and at interviews and every place she went throughout her entire career. Whoever this woman is, I've never seen her before anywhere on planet Earth until now. Now, obviously, I personally don't know what is true and what is not true. But I do know there's a marriage license, and I do know she was underage. And soon after it all came out, Aaliyah's parents wanted the marriage annulled, and they got the marriage annulled. So they knew that he married her. Did they think there wasn't a sexual relationship going on with her? Because here's my thing, right? It's almost like nobody knows what to deny. R. Kelly denies knowing she was 15. Aaliyah's parents deny that they had a sexual relationship. R. Kelly is saying, I didn't know she was underage. He's not denying a sexual relationship, really, is he? I don't know. Did he ever deny a sexual relationship? Because why would he deny a sexual relationship with her if he thought she was of age? Because if you're going to marry a girl, it's because you love her and you're attracted to her and probably you want to have sex with her at some point. So why would you marry her if you weren't going to have a sexual relationship with her? And I'd have to ask the same question to Aaliyah's mother. Why do you think he would marry her if not to have a sexual relationship with her? And if he's saying that he didn't know she was underage, it's very likely that they did have that relationship. And I get it. I have no doubt that Aaliyah's parents loved her completely. I do not blame them for any of this. We can't always protect our children from what happens out there. We want to, but we can't always protect them from everything. I have no doubt that Aaliyah's mother wants to protect her memory and doesn't want anybody to think about her daughter as a victim or somebody who went through something difficult, because she loves her daughter and she wants her only remembered in the most best positive light. I completely get that. So let's move on. Sadly, we cannot ask Aaliyah herself. On August 25th, 2001, Aaliyah and members of her record company boarded a twin-engine Cessna to fly from the Bahamas, where she was shooting a video, to Florida. The plane crashed shortly after takeoff, and Aaliyah and the 8 others on board didn't make it. Apparently, the plane was over capacity, and the pilot who was flying it, he had obtained his license, I guess illegally, because he said he had all these flight hours and he didn't, so they didn't make it. Aaliyah was a beautiful girl, an amazing singer, a fantastic dancer, and from what I know of her, a beautiful soul. Even after her death, her music still lives on, and had she survived, she would have had a flourishing and successful career in the music industry because she had everything it took. But why was no one protecting her in those early days? At the very least, her uncle, Barry Hankerson, right? He was there, he introduced her, he was in the music industry. Somebody should have been there for her. She was 12 when she got involved with this life, and everyone knows that the industry is full of sex and drugs and alcohol, and it's really no place for a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old. It's no place for a young child like that, especially if they don't have constant supervision and they don't have somebody constantly there to remind them to still be a kid and still have fun and focus on school still and these kinds of things. And I do also understand that when somebody is talented like Aaliyah was, her parents didn't want to hold her back from reaching her full potential. They didn't want to stifle her talent. So they thought they were doing what was best for her at that time. They thought by letting her follow her dream, they were doing what was best for her. And nobody should ever judge a parent for doing that. It's a hard decision to make. You don't know, as a parent, what to do. You don't know if you should protect them and put them in a bubble so nothing can touch them. You don't know if you should let them go out and experience life for themselves so they can learn from their own mistakes. You don't know what to do. You want to take them and put them in a bubble, but you know you can't. So I don't blame Aaliyah's parents at all for this. I just want to know who was watching her, who was with Aaliyah, who was making sure that nothing was happening to her. I honestly think that Aaliyah's parents just trusted the wrong person. The controversy with Aaliyah and R. Kelly quickly faded, almost as if nothing had ever happened. And while it was all going down, he just kept getting more and more popular. And in my opinion, this was probably his first brush with the public knowing about his true nature. And it was a pretty big one. The way it faded into irrelevancy so quickly, in my opinion, I think it made him feel untouchable. I think it gave him a big head and a big ego, and he said, well, if I can marry a 15-year-old girl and get away with it, nobody's gonna bat an eye, and I'm not losing any money, what can't I do? He was selling albums, packing arenas. He was picking up young girls in every single city he went to. He and his buddies would go to the malls in all these cities and just pick up girls who are walking the malls, because grown men go to the mall just to hang out. Grown men who are famous recording artists like to spend their free time walking around the mall in all these different cities. No, he's picking up high school girls because he knows that's where high school girls hang out, in my opinion. But anyways, he would pick out a girl or two or three, and then he would have his buddies go up to these girls and say, R. Kelly wants to meet you. You've been chosen. And like I said, these were high school girls. These were teenagers. They were starstruck. They felt special for being noticed by someone who was rich and famous, and they felt like they were the chosen one. They felt like they were the only one he was doing this to. This was some fairy tale, you know, like you're walking through the mall and R. Kelly approaches you or has his friend approach you and they're like, he wants to have an audience with you. You know, it's like you're being brought to see the king. As a 34-year-old woman, I can imagine if I was like walking in the mall and somebody walked up to me and was like, Ian Somerhalder wants to meet you, I would drop everything. Like I drop all my bags. I'd be like to a stranger, I'd say, hey, can you watch my kids for me for a second? I have to go meet Ian Somerhalder. I'm kidding, but really, I would get them a babysitter before I went to meet him. But I understand, right? I understand that feeling of being starstruck. I understand that feeling of fangirling. I completely get it. This is somebody that you look up to. This is somebody who's famous, and you just feel lucky to be chosen. Craig Williams, he's a record producer, and he spoke in the docuseries as well, and he met R. Kelly in the late 80s. He would sometimes work with him around this time, or he would go to the studio, and he claims that there were girls around all the time, young girls. And he keeps saying in the docuseries, I didn't check their IDs or anything. I wasn't checking their IDs, but they looked young. He literally says, verbatim, what was going on, it didn't look good to me. He says he would go to the recording studio and there were girls in every room, and there was like a bed in the main studio, and there was all these random rooms that there would be girls just stowed away in there. He's since come under fire for the statements in the docuseries, and he claims, you know, he wasn't in R. Kelly's like inner circle or anything, and he ended up moving away from Chicago in 1993. And he claims he didn't speak to or see R. Kelly for a decade, only visiting the studio briefly in 2003. And to that I say, is that really the point? I mean, I'm sure this guy's not a bad guy, Craig Williams. I'm sure he's not an evil man. I'm sure he didn't literally know the gravity of the situation or how far it was going. I'm sure he didn't realize that it would spin out of control and become what it became. Yet in his own words, it didn't look good to him. It didn't look good, so he looked the other way, like so many others in R. Kelly's life, his friends, his family, everybody who worked for him at this time, they all just looked the other way. He was emotionally and mentally abusing and manipulating these girls, but this kind of systematic manipulation does not happen overnight. It doesn't start off like that, or nobody would ever be in an abusive relationship, right? If you meet somebody and day one, they're already beating you or calling you stupid or making you feel bad, you're not going to continue a relationship with this person. No. Serial abusers will wait and be the most charming, amazing, kind, sweet person until they've got you hooked, until they know that you're in love, until they know that you're emotionally dependent on them in some way. And that's when they'll start introducing little pieces of abuse, just little by little, step by step. It's a system. It's not an overnight thing. They don't come right out and just start hitting you. They'll, call you stupid first and see how you react to that, or try to control you in small little ways and see how you react to that. They'll start off by telling you, I don't want you to wear that skirt, it's too short, and I don't want anybody to see that except me, because they're like actually flattering you at the same time. So they're trying to control what you wear and what you look like, but they're following it with, I only want to see that. It's such, it's a privilege to be able to see your legs, and I don't want every man out there to see your legs. And then later they'll follow it with, don't wear that skirt because you're mine. So now they're bringing in the control and the possession. And then later they'll say, don't wear that skirt, and if you question me, I'm going to punch you in the face. So this happens little by little. They see what they can get away with. They see if you push back. If you're somebody that pushes back, they don't really want to mess with you anymore, to be honest, because they're going to go after people that don't push back right away until it's too late. These girls who are all women now, they mostly tell the same story, and I have a hard time believing that every single one of them is lying. I have a hard time believing that every single one of them got together privately and got their stories straight. He would pull them in with his celebrity and a promise of furthering their own singing career. He would be normal at first, not only normal, but sweet, complimentary. He would buy them things. He would be vulnerable with them, tell them personal things about him. He'd make them feel special, important, cared for. Not only that, but we have to understand there's a very unequal power dynamic here on so many levels. You have a child and an adult. You have a powerful, rich, well-known man and a young girl from some small town who still goes to high school. They hadn't developed their sense of self yet. They didn't know anything about life. They were naive, and he knew exactly what he was doing. Allegedly, he would feed them alcohol, bring them to parties, introduce them to people, and then he would have a sexual relationship with them, usually when they were under the influence of alcohol at first, because these are young girls. Once again, they're not used to drinking alcohol in high quantities, so most likely they would be out of it and just kind of going along with whatever he wanted, because who's going to say no to R. Kelly, right? He's trying to help me. He's trying to make me something. He thinks I'm special. He thinks I'm wonderful. He wants to be with me. I'd be stupid to say no to him and ruin my chance at, making it big and ruin a relationship with him because they thought they were his girlfriend. His MO was consistent and systematic. At first, he would just start isolating them from everybody, friends, family, anybody, pretty much. He would literally lock them away in rooms. And this is a common technique used by abusers. They don't want the victim to feel as if they have anybody else. They don't want the victim to feel like there's any place to go if this doesn't work out. They want to be able to look at the victim and say, see, nobody's around for you. Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you but me. I'm the only thing you have. And then he would tell them that they had to call him daddy. And they had to ask him permission for everything. If they had to go to the bathroom, they had to ask for daddy's permission. If they wanted to eat, they had to ask for daddy's permission. If they wanted to take a shower or brush their teeth, they had to ask for daddy's permission. They couldn't leave their hotel room, not even to go get a soda from the vending machine, without asking for permission and letting him know exactly where they were going. And he told them, if you leave, I have people following you everywhere you go. I know where you are, so don't do anything stupid. If other people were around, they weren't allowed to talk to the other people weren't allowed to talk to them, and they had to either look down or stand facing a wall. So basically, it looks to me like he just treated them as pets. Worse than pets, because I would never do that to my pet. If they broke any of these rules, if they left without asking permission, if they ate without asking permission, if they contacted somebody that they weren't supposed to contact, if they questioned him or talked back, there was punishments that he had for them. He would take their cell phones from them so they couldn't contact anybody. He would starve them, not let them eat for days. I think one of the girls said the longest she remembers going without food when she was with R. Kelly was 3 days. But he would still make them sit there and watch him and everybody else eat. He would slap them or hit them, verbally abuse them, tell them they were stupid, useless, nobody cared what they had to say. And he kept all his girls separated from each other, right? He didn't want them to interact with each other at all, unless it was in the bedroom where he did want them to interact. But he didn't want them talking to each other. He didn't want them comparing stories. But R. Kelly had 2 faces, and he had a public persona and an image to live up to. And he actually ended up getting married to somebody who was more age appropriate for him. In 1996, he proposed to one of his backup dancers, Andrea Lee. She was 22 when they got married, much more age appropriate. Andrea also spoke quite candidly in this docuseries. You can tell this is a beautiful and strong woman who has seen her share of trauma and heartache. I mean, she's gorgeous still, even, today. She looks just like the pictures of herself when she was this young dancer. She's a gorgeous woman. She's gorgeous. She was an amazing dancer. When she auditioned for him, there was her and obviously other girls auditioning for him, and everybody there said she stood out so far above the rest because she was just such a beautiful dancer. So she was talented. She was gorgeous. She was strong. She had a lot going for her. She got the job, obviously, and Andrea says that he was cocky and, normal R. Kelly in front of everybody else, but with her, he was just Robert. He was vulnerable, and he shared with her how hard it was to lose his mother to cancer, and he shared with her his frustration in not being able to read and write very well, and he actually asked her if she would help him and teach him how to read and write. And abusers do this too. They show their vulnerability to the people they want to abuse. She felt protective of this man who had a little boy inside of him who just wanted to be loved and cared for. And this is pretty common, especially in women. This is the maternal thing inside of us. This is something a lot of women do. They see a man who's vulnerable, who's flawed, but has potential, and they try to fix him because they want to help him, because they want to see him reach that potential. It's the mother inside of every woman, even if she's not a mother. That mother is there, and some people look at it as a weakness. I don't. I think if you're smart and you use it correctly, don't let people manipulate you. It's not a weakness. It's actually a strength. But, who among us has not been manipulated by somebody who is trying to prey on that softer, caring side of you? I have. I'm pretty sure every woman here has as well. So it's really an excellent character trait, unless you find yourself in a relationship with somebody who's a narcissist, who takes and takes and takes until you're empty because they never gave you anything back. In February of 1996, R. Kelly proposed to Andrea when he flew a plane overhead with a banner on it that said, "Will you marry me?" She said yes. He then sprung a secret wedding on her that she didn't even know about. And I guess he's a big fan of these secret weddings because his marriage to Aaliyah was secret as well. Rumor has it was a gorgeous wedding. It was well done. He'd gone all out, but she hadn't had any part of it. She wasn't able to plan her own wedding. She didn't get to pick out a wedding dress. Her family wasn't there. And so she thought that was kind of odd. Like, he just brought her to a room and opened the doors and was like, "Surprise! Here's your wedding." It's kind of weird. It's kind of controlling. Lisette Martinez began a relationship with R. Kelly in the winter of 1995 when she was a 17-year-old high school student living in Miami, Florida. The then 28 R. Kelly picked her up at a shopping mall. Of course, I guess she was walking in the mall with her friend and she saw him and she said to her friend, "That's R. Kelly." And her friend was like, "No." And he heard her, but he didn't approach her himself. He heard her say that she saw him, and then he sent one of his friends over to tell her, "R. Kelly wants to meet you. You've been chosen." Just as a heads up, the age of consent in Florida is 18 and Lisette was 17. But anyways, according to Lisette, he told her he was going to make her famous. She had a great voice. He was going to make her famous. That night, he brought her out to dinner with some friends, and they were sitting there and drinking, and then he leaned over and kissed her. And she remembered thinking, like, this isn't really right. He's over 10 years older than me. I didn't think that this was what it was about. And at the same time, that voice in her head also popped in and was like, "But this is R. Kelly. I should feel lucky. I shouldn't feel weird about this. I should feel lucky I was chosen." So she let it happen. R. Kelly had promised her the world, and to her at that point, a kiss probably felt like a small price. But of course, a kiss wasn't all that R. Kelly wanted from Lisette. Even when she told him she was a virgin, he had no problem with that. He liked it, in fact. Lisette tells the same story about the rules, what they were allowed to do, what they weren't allowed to do, how they had to ask permission for everything, how he would literally store her away in a hotel room and just come in when he wanted to have sex with her. And then he would leave again and not say when he was coming back. And he'd be gone for days until he came back. And she wasn't allowed to leave or contact anybody. She would just be in a hotel room by herself, waiting for him to reappear. She remembers having to call him daddy, being slapped in the face if she ever talked back. He made her perform sexual acts in public, which was humiliating to her. She began to feel like nothing more but a sexual object and a possession. At one point, Lisette became pregnant and R. Kelly wanted her to take care of it. Of course he did. He was a married man who was going to have children of his own with his wife, and he had a public persona to uphold. He didn't want any sign of his indiscretions When she was in the process of losing the baby, she called him because she was alone. She wanted him to be with her, and he was nowhere to be found. He wouldn't answer his calls or texts, and he did not end up coming to be with her while she was going through this. She was alone. The gravity of the situation became clear to Lisette when she caught a really bad bout of mono from him in 1999, and it turned into like a bigger infection. She had to be hospitalized for 2.5 weeks. Once again, R. Kelly's nowhere to be found. She's in the hospital, she's really sick, like hooked up to machines, and nobody can find him. So her friend, who ended up showing up and staying with her at the hospital, said, "This is a bad situation. You're basically like a prostitute. You have to stop seeing him. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't love you." So Lisette thankfully got out of there, thankfully. But his abusive and controlling ways were not reserved for his girlfriends. His wife, beautiful, strong Andrea, she experienced it as well. Andrea tells stories in the docuseries about how he changed her cell phone number without telling her, so none of her family or friends could get a hold of her. She said he needed to control everything. The smallest thing had to be exactly the way he wanted it. And if it wasn't, he would lose his mind. He would tell her she was stupid, she was useless, she couldn't do anything right. She says that down to his pancakes had to be cooked perfectly to his liking, with the edges crispy, and if they were not exactly how he wanted them, he would say, "You messed this up. Not thanks for making me breakfast, but you messed my pancakes up." One of R. Kelly's backup dancers remembers a time that she went to the Kelly home, and she was there watching a basketball game with R and some of his friends, and she kept hearing this tapping sound, like she's hearing this like tapping sound, and it's going on, and finally she says to R. Kelly, "Do you hear that tapping sound?" And he said, "Yeah," and did nothing else. And finally, Andrea, his wife, peeks her head out from the doorway of her bedroom, and she says, "I'm hungry. May I please come out and get something to eat?" She had to ask permission in her own home to come out into the kitchen and make herself something to eat. Everybody says after Andrea became R. Kelly's wife, she changed. She became quieter, more within herself. Didn't really speak out that much. Didn't really talk to anybody. And they would only find later that that was how he wanted her to be. That's how he told her to be, or there would be punishments to follow. She tries to explain how this happened, how a normal and happy marriage could turn into something so toxic. She said he had two sides to him, and she loved the one side of him, the man she'd met and fallen for so much that she would have done anything to bring him back. And it seemed like when she didn't anger him, made his pancakes right, did everything he asked, he was that man. He was nice and sweet until he wasn't. But she wanted so badly to just not be abused, not be yelled at, not be under so much stress and pressure. So she felt like it was easier to just go along with it, to do what he wanted. There's lots of ways that we as women will explain abusive behavior coming from a man. We'll say he's going through a hard time at work, or he must be stressed out about something now. This will pass in a week or 2 weeks. When it doesn't pass after a week or 2 weeks, and it goes on for months and years, we will continue making excuses, not realizing that we've been making excuses for so long, and this isn't a phase, and this isn't going to pass, and this is just who he is. When R. Kelly was being nice to her and sweet to her and loving to her, it was very easy to forget all the rest. She thought she had him back, and then she would lose him again. But really, we know she didn't have him back. He was just manipulating her. He was abusing her. And in order to abuse somebody, you have to keep them dependent on you. Now, anyone who has never been in an abusive relationship will find this hard to understand. She wasn't actually chained, but the psychological chains are real. She could have walked out at any time, yes. But the learned helplessness is an actual thing that happens. You're told you're useless. You're told you're helpless. You're told you can't do anything. You're told nobody cares about you, and you start to believe it. So R. Kelly calls himself the Pied Piper of R&B. And in my opinion, this is a classic case of hiding in plain sight. The Pied Piper of R&B? Like, are you serious? Pied Piper is a legendary musician who uses his music to lure children away from their towns and families. That's creepy, right? Because that's really exactly what R. Kelly does. He uses his music, goes into all these different towns and cities, and lures young girls, children, away from their families and homes. Now, when he was asked about why he calls himself the Pied Piper of R&B, he says it's because he started using flutes in his music, and he just thought, Pied Piper? Flutes? That's my nickname now. I mean, you use drums in your music too, but you didn't call yourself the little drummer boy of R&B, did ya? No, the Pied Piper, that's his way of just like giving a middle finger to everybody. Like, I'm doing all of this in front of everybody, and nobody's stopping me. And nobody cares about these girls. Get out of here, R. Kelly, with your weak-ass excuses. Let's talk about recording artist Stephanie Edwards, better known as Sparkle. She released her debut album on R. Kelly's label in 1998, and the first single from it was a duet with R. Kelly called Be Careful, which he wrote, produced, and composed. It's a song about a relationship that started off great, but now the man is just always hurting his girlfriend, and she's had enough, and he's like, why are you mad? I'm not doing anything wrong. And Sparkle recalls being at the recording studio and finding it odd that she would say hello to people. She was friendly, she was trying to be friendly, and nobody would talk to her. Like, they would act like she hadn't spoken, like she wasn't there. And she's thinking, what did I do? Did I offend somebody? Is everybody mad at me? She would find out later that R. Kelly had told everybody not to speak to her for whatever reason. It's just his controlling nature. She also claims, I like this girl, that she would go out of her way to continue speaking to people even more just because she knew he didn't like it, and she kind of wanted to like give him a dig. Space Jam debuted in theaters on November 15th, 1996, and with the combined appeal of Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes, the movie quickly shot to #1, grossing over $90 million in the US. And the soundtrack was just as successful, peaking at #2 on the Billboard music charts and going double platinum in less than 2 months. And R. Kelly's moving ballad, I Believe I Can Fly, was front and center. The popularity of this song broadened his reach and his audience. It wasn't just teenagers or, young people listening to his club anthems anymore. This, I Believe I Can Fly, was literally played nonstop on every single soft rock station. So you got people in like their 40s and 50s and 60s just jamming out to R. Kelly in their cars on their way to their job as an accountant, and they loved it. And you'd have these little kids who, Space Jam was a great movie, but these little kids, they loved it. So you've got 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds who are just loving Space Jam, playing the movie on repeat, and the song's just blasting out at the end, and the kids loved it too. The song was played at like church services. It was inspirational, it was uplifting, it was everything you'd want in a really good power ballad. And now we had fans in every age group, right? From young kids to older adults and everything in between. He won 3 Grammys that year, each one an extra boost to his already overinflated ego. Each one a tangible sign that he was in fact untouchable. Sparkle felt that R. Kelly had done really good things with her career. He was a good person to have produced her album, not only because of his name and that people respected it, but he was actually very talented with music. And so she introduced her young niece to R. Kelly. Her niece was a rapper, a very good rapper, according to Sparkle, and Sparkle wanted to see R. Kelly do for her niece what he'd done for Sparkle. At the time that she met R. Kelly, Sparkle's niece was 14, and she began to spend a lot of time at the recording studio in Chicago. They were allegedly working on music, which is what you should be doing at a recording studio. Nobody really thought anything of it. Sparkle, her family, they just thought he was an older guy, who would be almost a big brother figure to this young girl and protect her and guide her and show her the ropes. But according to Lisa Van Allen, who was 17 when she met R. Kelly, that was not what was happening. Lisa was just like all the others. She felt special to be picked by him out of all the other girls. She had caught his eye. He'd buy her clothes, take her to award shows, introduce her to people, tell her that he loved her, and she thought she was his girlfriend. But eventually it turned into the same story. He was more interested in having sex than anything else. She says he would bring her to the recording studio where there was multiple beds in all different rooms. He would bring her to his home where his wife was often upstairs or in a different room at the same time. And he would make her do unthinkable things, all while he recorded it. And he had the whole professional setup. He had lights, he had a professional camera, he had a tripod. He would stand behind the camera and direct her and other girls to tell them what to do, to make sure they had the right angle. And like he thinks he's like a porno director or something. One day he introduced Lisa to another girl who was waiting in one of the rooms, the Colorado room. And he told Lisa that this girl was 16 years old, and then he pretty much said, I want you guys to get to know each other. Lisa didn't really want to do it. You know, she felt super awkward about it. This was the first time he had invited somebody else into their relationship, and she began to cry, and he got upset, and he said, why are you crying? I can't record this and watch it back with you crying in it. He's not worried that she's upset by something or having trouble with something. He's worried that it won't make for good footage for him to watch back later. So he brought a mattress in and put it on the floor, and he told them what to do. He basically just started directing them and telling them what to do before he eventually got in on the action himself. Now, while this was happening, Lisa said she had a sneaking suspicion that R. Kelly and the girl, this wasn't their first time together. The girl seemed to know what to do. They had a familiarity between them. And like I said, Lisa did not think that this was the first time they had been together. But Lisa, this girl, and R. Kelly would be together several other times after this. Well, one day after R. Kelly had finished recording himself and Lisa having sex, he took the tape out of the camera and he put it into a duffel bag that he had in the studio. And then he left. He had to go do something. So she remembers feeling terrified, but she, kind of felt like her curiosity got the best of her. So she went in the bag and popped the tapes in and she starts playing them. And what she saw, she wasn't super surprised by. She kind of knew it was happening, but she was still shocked at the same time because it was like tape after tape of R. Kelly with all these other different young girls. Lots of them. And then she finally found the tape where it was her and the other girl on it, and she didn't want him to have it. She didn't want anybody to have that kind of leverage on her, which I completely understand, so she took it, and he never noticed. But she didn't want it in her possession because she didn't want him to find her with it because she didn't want to be in trouble. So she gave it to another recording artist on Kelly's label and asked him to keep it safe for her. She gave this tape to the other person in the summer of 2000. The Chicago Sun-Times unearthed what was going on with R. Kelly, or what had been going on with R. Kelly. Music journalist Jim DeRogatis received an anonymous fax that basically told him that you should check into R. Kelly and lawsuits that have been brought against him. He has a thing for underage girls. He's got a lot of lawsuits. Like, you should look into it. And Jim says that at first, because he was a fan of R. Kelly and wrote often about his music, Jim says at first he threw the paper in the corner of his desk and he said, player hater. But something about the fax and the details given in the fax kept nagging at him. So finally he pulled it out and he called the Chicago Police Department and he asked for the head of the sex crimes unit. And when she got on the phone, he asked about R. Kelly and she said, oh, it's about time somebody called about this. I can't talk to you. And then hung up. Super helpful, thank you. That's when the Chicago Sun-Times began unearthing lawsuit after lawsuit against Mr. Robert Kelly. A girl from Kenwood Academy claimed that when she was 14, he would force her and her fellow sophomore classmates to have threesomes with him. And when he dropped her 2 years later, when he was done with her, she slit her wrist and tried to kill herself. These lawsuits were all settled out of court, and these were 5-6-figure buyouts, settlements. They also found the marriage certificate and they found proof that Aaliyah was 15 at the time that R. Kelly had married her. They published a story in December of 2000 reporting the allegations. When this story broke, Lisa Van Allen claims that she was terrified that the sex tape was going to surface. The sex tape with her on it, and she did not want that. So she says she called R. Kelly and admitted to having taken it, told him who she had given it to, and R. Kelly brought both of them in, gave them lie detector tests to make sure that there weren't copies, and she says she passed it, but the guy who had taken the tape, who said he didn't make copies, he didn't pass it. So R. Kelly knew he had made copies, and he offered him $250,000 for the tape and all its copies. He would give him some now, and he would give him the rest when all the copies made their way safely back to R. Kelly. And then in November of 2001, the sex tape made its way to the desk of Jim DeRogatis of the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, the newspaper actually called Sparkle in because they wanted to play her the tape. They thought that she could help them in seeing who was on the tape because she would know these girls. And as soon as Sparkle saw the tape, she knew that the girl on the tape was her 14-year-old niece. The girl on the tape was her niece and had the same hairstyle that she wore when she was 14. So even though R. Kelly had told Lisa Van Allen that the girl was 16 at the time that they had this threesome and this tape was made, the girl was actually 14, according to Sparkle. To this day, Sparkle feels really guilty, obviously, for having introduced her niece to R. Kelly, because he was a predator, but she didn't know that. And she's gotten a lot of heat from people, and I don't think it's right. I'm sure she wouldn't knowingly lead her niece into, the predator's den. She honestly just thought that R. Kelly could help her niece make it big and, use some of her talent. And I definitely don't think that she meant anything bad to happen. Lisa claims while all this was happening, R. Kelly was basically trying to have her killed. Now, his lawyers obviously deny this, and there's no proof of this. She could be just paranoid. She could be just scared because R. Kelly had made her that way. But she truly believes that he was trying to get rid of her. And, that's scary enough. And of course, R. Kelly pulled a Shaggy. It wasn't me. It wasn't me on the tape. You can hear people calling his name from different rooms. They're saying like, R, they're calling him from a different room and you can hear it on the tape, but he says it wasn't him and it wasn't that girl either. And while all of this is going down, the allegations, the newspaper stories, the sex tape, his arrest, his trial, nobody wants to believe it. The public doesn't want to believe it. The community doesn't want to believe it, especially his community in Chicago, the place he'd come from. They, like I said, he was a hero there, and they didn't want to believe that about him. Everybody just thought it was girls trying to get money, trying to get fame, trying to, connect their name to his. They wrote these girls off as liars. Nobody's doing anything. No artists are speaking out against him. No public figures are speaking out against him. And sure, plenty of them are doing it now. And that's great. I guess better late than never. But it's trendy now, right? It's like you're faced with so much now that you kind of have to, or you just look stupid. But back then, nobody was speaking out against him. He even performed at the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics in 2002. The sex tape then got released, probably one of the many copies that was made of it, and it began being sold. This is a video that's basically child pornography. This is a video that shows a young girl with an even younger girl and R. Kelly, an old guy. And it's being sold on the streets as a celebrity sex tape. People bought it as if it was entertainment. It just disgusts me. And R. Kelly told one of the people that worked for him, like, man, I knew these tapes were gonna get me in trouble, but I just can't stop. Like, I'm addicted to it. Before R. Kelly got arrested, he knew it was about to go down, and he didn't want his wife, who was pregnant with their third child, to know what was happening. So he had her taken from her home and brought to like Florida, I think, but she didn't know what was going on. He didn't tell her where she was going. Nobody would tell her anything. Nobody would speak to her. They just took her and brought her someplace and then like hid her in a house. And she was so stressed and upset by this that she actually had to go to the emergency room and be induced because they couldn't find the baby's heartbeat. And through all of this, she's trying to reach her husband. Like, she's laying in a hospital, about to be emergency induced, about to give birth to their third child, and she can't find him anywhere. And after the baby comes and she's holding her newborn son in her arms, the news is on and she's watching it, and this is when she discovers that he's been arrested on 21 counts of child pornography. He pled not guilty, he posted bail, he went on with life as usual. He kept making music, he kept touring, he kept picking up new girls. Nothing was breaking his stride. A year after his initial arrest, he was arrested again in Miami, and they seized his camera equipment and 12 digital photographs. But a judge threw it out because he said that the police didn't have like the proper documentation or warrants to search the areas that they had searched where they found the camera and the pictures. And of course, he denied it all to his wife. He told Andrea, this is a lie. They're just trying to get money. They're just trying to frame me. This is a lie. This never happened. And she felt like she was going crazy because she knew it wasn't a lie. Like deep down inside of her, she knew it was the truth. And she said she contemplated around this time trying to kill herself. And she went to the domestic abuse website and she took a 17-question test. And that's when she realized she was being abused and she could not do it anymore. So she took $2,500 in cash, a duffel bag, and her 3 children by the hand, and she walked out of that house under the cover of night, just escaping, basically, like getting out of there. She didn't have any money. Everything was in his name. She didn't have anything, but she would rather live with nothing and keep her safety and her self-respect than to live another day with him. Once again, all this is happening. All this evidence, all these allegations. No artists are speaking out against him. None. So his lawyer actually made a statement that it wasn't R. Kelly on the tape. It was his younger brother, Kerry. And Kerry was not having any of it. Kerry was like, that is not me on the tape. And he actually came forward and did an interview where he said, I think my brother's a pedophile. Something else important to note about Kerry and R. Kelly when they were kids. According to the brothers, they were both sexually abused by their older sister, Teresa, who was 16 at the time. And R. Kelly was 10 and Kerry was 6. Kerry said he never told an actual adult what was happening because he went to his older brother, Robert, R. Kelly, and he told him what was happening. And R. Kelly looked at him and said, no, that's not happening, you're wrong. Even though it was happening to him too. So Kerry felt like if my older brother's not going to believe me, what adult is going to believe me? And he kept quiet about it. And he didn't find out till years later that the same thing was happening to R. Kelly at the same time. We can, as human beings, find it in our heart to feel sorry for Robert Kelly and what he went through as a small child. But we should not use this to excuse him ever. Abuse of all kinds happens, and usually in a cyclical manner. The abused who has been made to feel powerless becomes the abuser so they can regain some of the power they lost. But not every person who's a victim of sexual abuse or physical abuse or mental abuse or emotional abuse goes on to become a monster and do the same thing that caused them so much pain and trauma. Not everyone participates in this cycle. It's a choice. And it's a choice he made as a grown man. I feel bad that it happened to him, but I don't let my empathy distract me from what he actually did to so many young girls. So R. Kelly asked Kerry Kelly to retract the statement about R. Kelly being a pedophile and that it wasn't Kerry on the tape. And he said he would pay him $100,000 if he did. Allegedly. Allegedly, he said he would pay him $100,000 if he did. R. Kelly also never publicly came out and defended his younger brother, saying it wasn't him on the tape. So in his silence, he pretty much let people support this theory. Kerry turned down the $100,000 payoff. And of course, R. Kelly's lawyer denies this offer was ever made. So Kerry knows what's up. He's like not having it with R. Kelly. But R. Kelly's older brother, Bruce Kelly, he defends his brother. He says, I like older women. Rob likes younger women. It's just a preference. Everybody has preferences. What's so wrong with it? But you literally have to understand, this is an example of hopefully a small group of people out there who literally feel this way. Still to this day, they defend him and they say, what's the big deal?